The Fab Four reunion is being described today as a PR disaster after Meghan and Harry were given the cold shoulder at Westminster Abbey.
Sophie, the Duchess of Edinburgh, has never built her reputation on dramatic headlines, emotional interviews, or carefully staged public battles. In fact, for years, she has represented almost the complete opposite of that approach. Quiet, disciplined, deeply loyal to the institution, and intensely private. But sometimes the people who speak the least reveal the most through their actions. And when it comes to Meghan Markle, Sophie's behavior over the years has painted a remarkably revealing picture, one that many royal watchers believe says far more than any public statement ever could. Because long before the explosive interviews, the Hollywood deals, the documentaries, and the endless media warfare, there was actually an attempt inside the palace to help Meghan succeed. A serious attempt. And at the center of it was Sophie.
What this title means for Sophie, beautiful Sophie, is that she no longer has to curtsy to Meghan Markle, okay? In the line of succession, she no longer has to curtsy to Meghan Markle, okay? That is a booyah moment.
If you enjoy deep royal analysis and untangling the hidden dynamics behind these public moments, make sure to subscribe, because the deeper this story goes, the more complicated the royal relationships become. When Meghan Markle married Prince Harry and officially entered royal life, Queen Elizabeth reportedly understood immediately that the transition would not be easy. The monarchy is not simply a family. It is an institution built on hierarchy, restraint, tradition, protocol, and constant public scrutiny. Even people born into it struggle under the pressure. For someone arriving from an entirely different world, Hollywood, celebrity culture, American media, personal branding, the adjustment would be enormous. And that is precisely why Sophie was chosen. Not because she was glamorous, not because she sought attention, but because she had lived the exact same transition Meghan was about to face.
Speaking with The Telegraph recently, the couple joked, "Oprah who?" and "What interview?" in response to the fallout from the March TV special.
Sophie had entered the royal family as an outsider too. She was not born royal. She had to learn everything from scratch, navigate intense media attention, survive public criticism, and understand the unwritten rules that govern royal life. And importantly, Sophie had made mistakes herself. One of the biggest came in 2001, during the infamous tabloid sting operation that threatened her public reputation and embarrassed the palace. For many public figures, an incident like that can permanently define them. But Sophie recovered carefully and methodically. She adapted. She learned. Over time, she transformed herself into one of the monarchy's most dependable working royals. That transformation matters because it explains why the Queen trusted her so deeply. By the time Meghan arrived, Sophie was viewed inside royal circles as stable, discreet, and emotionally intelligent. She understood both worlds, life before royalty and life inside it. In many ways, she was the ideal mentor. Someone who could privately explain what cameras never capture, the pressure, the sacrifices, the endless scrutiny, and the discipline required to survive within the institution.
So apparently, Sophie is married to Prince Edward. Well, she was upgraded from the Countess of Wessex to the Duchess of Edinburgh, okay? She got a little bit of a promotion. This is a big deal, but let me tell you why it's important. So both Queen Elizabeth and Queen Camilla previously held this title, but what this title means for Sophie, beautiful Sophie, is that she no longer has to curtsy to Meghan Markle.
Reports over the years suggest Sophie genuinely embraced that responsibility. According to royal commentators, she spent hours speaking with Meghan, answering questions, explaining royal duties, and offering insight into how palace life actually worked behind closed doors. This was not a superficial introduction. It was reportedly a serious effort to help Meghan avoid the exact mistakes that had hurt others before her. And perhaps the most revealing detail of all was Sophie giving Meghan her personal phone number and encouraging her to call any time. That single detail completely changes the narrative many people later accepted. Because critics of the royal family often argue Meghan was abandoned, isolated, and left alone to figure everything out herself. But Sophie's involvement suggests something very different. It suggests the institution did try to provide support, and not through cold officials or distant advisors, but through someone who had personally experienced the same transition herself. And this is where the story becomes far more interesting. Because if the palace truly placed one of its most trusted and experienced royal figures beside Meghan from the very beginning, then the real question is not whether help was offered. The real question becomes what happened after that help was extended. And once people started examining that question more closely, the entire narrative surrounding Meghan's royal experience began to look much more complicated than it first appeared. Sophie left that first meeting believing she had done something meaningful. She had opened the door completely, offering Meghan not only advice, but ongoing support from someone who truly understood the pressure of entering royal life as an outsider. According to royal reports, Sophie genuinely thought this would be the beginning of a strong relationship between the two women. But then something surprising happened. Nothing. There was reportedly no follow-up call, no second meeting, no effort from Meghan to continue the connection. Sophie had offered her personal number and encouraged Meghan to reach out anytime she needed guidance, yet royal commentators have long claimed that Meghan never took her up on the offer. And that detail changes the entire conversation surrounding Meghan's time inside the monarchy. Because for years, the public narrative focused heavily on the idea that Meghan had been left unsupported and isolated. But Sophie's reported involvement suggests the palace did attempt to help her transition, and not through distant staff members, but through one of the most respected women in the institution. Sophie herself reportedly did not give up immediately. According to insiders, she continued reaching out and offering support, but the interest simply was not there. And over time, another reported comment from Meghan began drawing attention. When discussions arose about support within the family, Meghan allegedly said, "I have Harry. That's all I need." On one level, it sounded loyal and romantic, but critics argue it also revealed a major misunderstanding about royal life itself. Harry could support Meghan emotionally, certainly, but he was not going to teach her decades of royal protocol, constitutional expectations, or how to navigate the institution as an outsider. That was exactly why the Queen had chosen Sophie in the first place. And this is where later moments suddenly started looking very different, particularly the curtsy incident from the Netflix documentary, where Meghan reenacted bowing to the Queen in a way many viewers considered mocking. What made the moment even more striking for royal observers was Harry sitting beside her, smiling through the story rather than recognizing why it upset so many people. To critics, it reinforced the idea that both Harry and Meghan had dismissed the very traditions senior royals had tried to help them understand. And eventually, even Sophie appeared to emotionally step back from the situation. After Harry and Meghan left royal duties, reports from a Sunday Times source claimed Sophie felt relieved by their departure, and relieved she no longer had to curtsy to Meghan. Now, whether every detail of that report was perfectly accurate or not, the fact Sophie's name was even attached to sentiments like that shocked many royal watchers, because Sophie is not known for public feuds or emotional outbursts. She is widely seen as one of the calmest, most diplomatic figures in the monarchy. So if even Sophie reached a point of frustration or relief, many observers believe it says a great deal about what tensions behind palace walls may actually have looked like. And once people began noticing that pattern, the entire Meghan story started appearing far more complicated than the public originally believed. All of those ignored calls, unanswered offers of support, and rejected attempts at mentorship did not simply disappear. They built quietly beneath the surface over time, layer by layer, until eventually, the tension became impossible to fully hide. And by the time Commonwealth Day 2020 arrived, Meghan and Harry's final major royal engagement before stepping away from royal duties, many royal observers believed something had fundamentally changed between Sophie and Meghan. Because this was no longer the same dynamic from the beginning, when Sophie had reportedly approached Meghan with patience, kindness, and genuine willingness to help her succeed. By this stage, the warmth appeared gone. And what made the moment so fascinating was that almost none of it was communicated verbally. It was all in the body language. That is what people noticed immediately. Sophie, normally known for her calm and approachable demeanor during royal events, appeared unusually restrained and emotionally distant around Meghan throughout the Commonwealth service. Observers pointed to her posture in particular, upright, stiff, controlled. There were very few signs of natural warmth between the two women. No visible ease, no relaxed interaction. And in royal settings, where every glance and gesture is analyzed endlessly, those small details become enormous. Because the royal family communicates far more through behavior than through words. Then came the moment many viewers still talk about today: the eye contact exchange. At one point during the service, Sophie turned toward Meghan and held direct eye contact with her without immediately looking away. It lasted only seconds, but the reaction afterward became the real focus. Meghan quickly lowered her gaze, and her smile noticeably faded. To many royal watchers, it looked like a moment carrying far more emotional weight than the public could fully understand. Now, of course, body language interpretation is always subjective. Different viewers see different things. But critics of Meghan have consistently pointed to that interaction as evidence that the relationship between the two women had deteriorated long before the Sussexes officially left royal life. And this is where the broader context becomes important. By early 2020, tensions inside the royal family were already reaching a breaking point. Harry and Meghan had announced their intention to step back as senior royals. Media battles were intensifying, and relationships behind palace walls were reportedly under enormous strain. So moments that might otherwise have seemed insignificant suddenly carried symbolic meaning. Even the departure from Westminster Abbey sparked conversation. As the royals exited, Meghan crossed between chairs in an apparent attempt to catch up with William and Catherine, rather than leaving alongside Sophie and Edward. Royal commentators immediately dissected the move, with some arguing it disrupted expected protocol and visually reinforced existing divisions within the family. Importantly, critics noted this was not about queuing order. Harry and Meghan were already scheduled to leave after William and Catherine. Instead, observers interpreted the moment as another subtle indication of interpersonal tension, a quiet but visible effort to separate from Sophie and Edward during one of the final public appearances before the Sussexes' departure. And that is why Commonwealth Day remains such an important moment in the royal story. Because beneath the formal clothing, polite smiles, and ceremonial setting, many people believe the event revealed the emotional reality behind the scenes. The breakdown was no longer hidden. The patience had run out. The attempts at guidance and reconciliation appeared exhausted. And perhaps most revealing of all was the fact that Sophie, one of the monarchy's most discreet and emotionally disciplined figures, no longer seemed interested in pretending otherwise. By the time the Oprah Winfrey interview aired in 2021, tensions inside the royal family were no longer subtle rumors whispered through palace corridors. They had exploded onto the global stage. Accusations, emotional revelations, allegations of isolation and lack of support. Suddenly, the monarchy faced one of the most damaging media moments in decades. And while senior royals largely avoided direct public responses, Sophie and Prince Edward delivered what many people still consider one of the sharpest reactions of the entire saga. Because when they were asked about the Oprah interview, they did not respond with outrage. They did not defend themselves emotionally. Instead, they answered with something far more cutting: dry royal sarcasm. Oprah, what interview? That single line instantly caught attention because it sounded less like confusion and more like deliberate dismissal. Observers immediately interpreted it as subtle but unmistakable shade aimed not only at the interview itself, but at the spectacle surrounding it. And coming from Sophie and Edward, two royals rarely associated with public drama, the comment landed even harder. But Sophie was not quite finished. In a later Telegraph interview, she reportedly added another remark that many royal watchers viewed as an even sharper jab. If you're not into chat shows, there's no reason why you should know who she is. Now, officially, the comment could be interpreted innocently. But within the wider context of the Oprah interview fallout, people instantly connected the dots. Critics of Meghan especially saw it as a form of royal payback, because many viewers remembered Meghan previously, claiming she had not researched Harry or known much about the royal family before their relationship. That statement had already been heavily debated online, with skeptics questioning whether it was believable given Harry's global fame. So when Sophie and Edward appeared to casually dismiss Oprah's celebrity status in return, many interpreted it as a very intentional mirror of Meghan's own earlier comments. And this is where Sophie's reputation becomes especially fascinating. She is not known as loud or confrontational. She does not engage in public feuds, which means when she does make pointed remarks, they tend to feel far more deliberate. The sharpness comes precisely from the restraint. Sophie rarely needs to raise her voice because the message is already clear underneath the diplomacy. Then came another moment royal commentators still reference today. During an interview reflecting on her own entrance into royal life, Sophie discussed how long it had taken her to properly adjust to the monarchy. She explained that she spent years learning the role, understanding expectations, and finding her place within the institution. According to Sophie, the process was gradual and uncertain. She did not know immediately how things would turn out, and many observers instantly connected that statement to Meghan. Not because Sophie directly mentioned her, but because the contrast was impossible to ignore. Sophie had spent years adapting to royal life despite early mistakes and intense scrutiny, while Meghan and Harry stepped away after roughly 2 years as senior working royals. To critics, the comparison carried an unmistakable implication. Successful integration into the monarchy requires patience, humility, and long-term adjustment, not immediate comfort or instant transformation. At the same time, Sophie remained publicly diplomatic. Even after all the controversy, she still gave measured, careful responses when speaking about Harry and Meghan. At one stage, she simply said, "I just hope they will be happy," while adding that the family tries to help any new member who joins. And that final detail may be the most important part of this entire story. Because underneath all the interviews, documentaries, accusations, and public narratives sits one uncomfortable contradiction many royal watchers continue debating today. Meghan repeatedly described feeling unsupported inside the institution, yet reports surrounding Sophie suggest support was, in fact, offered repeatedly. Guidance, mentorship, advice, emotional reassurance from someone uniquely qualified to provide it. But according to royal insiders, those efforts never truly developed into a relationship because Meghan allegedly rejected or ignored them. And over time, that appears to have changed Sophie's attitude completely. The patience disappeared. The warmth cooled. The willingness to keep reaching out faded away, not through dramatic public conflict, but through quiet withdrawal. And in many ways, that may be the most revealing royal response of all. In the end, what makes this entire story so fascinating is not loud confrontation or public arguments. It is the complete opposite. Sophie never turned herself into the center of the drama. She never sat down for emotional interviews. She never publicly attacked Meghan. And yet, through quiet moments, carefully chosen words, and visible shifts in behavior, many royal watchers believe she revealed exactly how she felt. Because when Queen Elizabeth personally encouraged Sophie to help Meghan transition into royal life, Sophie reportedly embraced the role sincerely. She understood the pressure Meghan was under because she had once lived through a similar adjustment herself. She knew what it felt like to enter the monarchy from the outside, to make mistakes under media scrutiny, and to slowly learn the rules of an institution that can overwhelm even the strongest personalities. But according to reports and royal commentators, those efforts never truly connected. The support was allegedly offered repeatedly, yet it was never fully accepted. And once that guidance was rejected, the distance between Meghan and the institution only appeared to grow wider. That is why critics often point to one uncomfortable contradiction in the entire Sussex narrative. Meghan frequently spoke about feeling unheard and unsupported inside the monarchy. Yet figures like Sophie reportedly did try to provide mentorship, advice, and emotional reassurance behind the scenes. The issue, according to observers, may not have been the total absence of help, but whether that help was ever genuinely welcomed. And once those relationships failed to develop, everything else seemed to unravel quickly afterward. Meghan once famously said she did not need people to love her, only to hear her. And in many ways, that may perfectly summarize why public opinion became so divided. People did hear her. They listened carefully. But many viewers also began comparing her version of events against the reactions and silence of the royals around her, especially someone like Sophie, whose reputation for patience and discretion had been built over decades. Meanwhile, Harry and Meghan's departure ultimately reshaped the royal landscape in ways many royal supporters quietly welcomed. Sophie and Edward eventually became the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, a title carrying enormous historical significance within the monarchy and further solidifying their standing as trusted senior royals. And perhaps that is the final contrast at the heart of this entire story. Sophie never needed to win the public battle loudly. She simply stepped back, remained composed, and allowed time to shape the narrative for her. So what do you think? Was Sophie quietly signaling her true feelings all along, or were people simply reading too much into the silence? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoy these deep royal breakdowns, make sure to subscribe, because there is always more happening beneath the surface than the headlines first reveal.